Keeping you waiting, Tom.
Hi, Tom.
Oh, thanks for taking my call. There's a couple of things I wanted to add. It's actually on local news now, but this is something I had heard about 4 or 5 years ago about sunburn missiles, cruise missiles that are the hypersonic cruise missiles that basically they make aircraft carriers obsolete. I've seen it basically on the TV news, the major channels, broadcast channels, that Russia now is bragging about their hypersonic missiles they say there's no defense against them. They travel at Mach 5. They travel close to across water. I think it's something like they can travel like 15 feet above the water, and they can actually follow the waves. And the other thing about the whole strategic situation in the Mideast, if I just look at my map of the region, I see that Saudi Arabia is pretty much blocked from getting easy access to the Atlantic Ocean by Israel and Syria. And then also they're blocked into the Indian Ocean to a certain extent by Yemen. So I think a lot of this is about Saudi Arabia having, easy access to ship their oil.
Right. Well, I tell you what, as I said before, Conspiracy Gary likes to put his little hat on. There's a guy on Twitter that I follow, and I would highly recommend, just because he's off Twitter now. You have to go to Gab to get him. It's Thomas Wictor, Wictor. You can actually find him on YouTube and Google and everything else. You can find him. And he is one of these guys that believes the Saudis are like the super secretive, long-term planning guys in the Middle East. He says that there's a ton of influence, covert ops by Saudi Arabia in Syria. And I wanted to ask Todd, I'm like, had he heard of this or did he know? We didn't get a chance to. Maybe next time. But according to Thomas Wictor, the Saudis are pushing all this. And is there the Russia and Turkey on one side and the Saudis on the other? What's the dynamics of that area going on? And I think part of what you're talking about, Saudi Arabia looking for access east and west, is part of that and playing into that. So either way,
the Saudis would even talk to Israel, and
which they're doing now.
Yes, exactly, right? and ally with them to some point.
Yeah. They've got to do their own, because they're an Islamic country. They have to watch dealing with the Jews in Israel, obviously. But I think they've both realized that, crazy Iranians.
Yes.
And the expansionist Russians who are looking to get a big chunk of power play in the East Mediterranean, they've got to ally. Why wouldn't they?
The enemy of my enemy.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? So that's the way it goes. And it's good to hear from Todd that Iran is not as stable as everyone wants to make them out to be, the big powerhouse. I firmly hope and pray that the people of Iran will rebel at some point.
Well, the question is, can they sustain a rebellion? That's the problem. I mean, it would be like trying to overthrow the Nazis in Germany, as unstable, as unpopular as they were towards the end.
Well, they overthrew the Shah, right? That's how the mullahs came in, but they did that by getting the will of the people behind them. Now, has the will of the people been so beaten down and submissioned by the mullahs that they can no longer stand up? I don't know. It's just heartbreaking to me that Iran used to be like the place in the Middle East to go visit. We always talk about Lebanon and Beirut being the Paris of the Middle East.
Yep.
Iran used to be a place when the Shah was there. I'm not saying he was a good guy. I'm sure he wasn't. But Westerners could go to Iran and you could vacation there and do all kinds of things. And you can't do that anymore because this animal barbarism of Shiite or Islamic extremism, right? It's just crazy. And I see on Facebook, YouTube, whatever, you see the young Iranian ladies dancing in the streets. Well, that's against the law, right?
Yeah.
So that's their little protest.
70s.
Yeah, and then they also a lot of them are trying to ditch the hijabs, and these morality police are accosting them in public. You'll see those videos on YouTube and Facebook all the time, too. So what else you got? Anything else, Tom?
Well, I just wanted to say I think it makes sense to me to have the strong defense here at home rather than being all over the world, making commitments all over the world. In martial arts, when I was always taught if you're ever gonna throw a punch or a kick, you're committed then, and that your opponent basically has an advantage on you because once you're committed, it can be anticipated what you're going to do.
Yeah, or you'll be off balance from delivering it, right?
Well, yeah. I know a lot of the the kickers and punchers were getting taken down pretty easy by the grapplers, which were basically the wrestlers, and it was always that in a one-on-one fight, it was always the guy who knew how to wrestle to the ground who would win over the kickers and punchers.
Yeah,
they'd get hit a couple of times, but we basically our main strength is our nuclear weapons, but they're really no good for anything except destroying massive life and property.
Yeah, once you commit to that, it's over for everybody. Right?
Bye-bye, Riyadh.
Yeah, goodbye, everybody. All right, well, great call. Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it.
Thanks for taking my call. Bye.
All right, let's take a call from Gary in Hazel Park. Gary, welcome to the show.
Hey, gentlemen. Hey, I would argue that aircraft carriers are obsolete. They might be obsolete in one theater or another, but worldwide, there's still many countries that fear them. We're talking about aircraft carriers here.
Yeah, well, you can launch your hypersonic missiles from aircraft carriers and submarines, I guess, right? So,
well, they're multi-purpose. I've always wondered what would be. I mean, battleships were it, right? Until aircraft carriers came along to project our strength. Then an aircraft carrier could trump a battleship, and did. And so what's next? Well, you have this big phalanx. Pardon me?
Space station.
Yeah, you're right. Space Force.
What is that? What is that weapon system that allegedly we already have? It's in orbit and it launches just like steel rods.
Yeah,
steel rods that come down. What is it? The hammer? I can't remember.
Forget the name of it.
That's from a movie.
No, I'm seeing articles all the time that this is already there.
Kinetic weapons. It's been known for a while. You could just drop rocks. Yeah. You don't have to put the rocks up in space. Spend that energy. You just need to take them from somewhere else, capture them, and drop them. Yeah,
these are not. I've heard the military has that technology where it's like a titanium rod, and when you drop it from space, it's just sheer kinetics. When it hits...
I know what you're talking about, and that's why we'd never survive a battle, an intergalactic battle, because all they have to do is grab a couple asteroids from the belt and wing them at us.
Exactly.
But also, the thing with Syria and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, we just sent them, or are going to send them, a whole lot of weapons, so they can fight all the wars over there. And the same people who are complaining about pulling out of Syria are complaining about the death of one shadowy guy in the embassy over there who was a operative of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Khashoggi.
So my point is, they can't have it both ways. Either you want us out of there, or you don't. And the way to get out of there is to supply Saudi Arabia with all the weapons they can handle, and pull out, let them handle it. Then our boys won't have to die for Saudi or
Israel,
land,
for that matter.
For land. Because the oil's out, like the other guy was saying. We're self-sufficient now. It's not oil. And I also perceive in the next, decade or two, that we'll be supplying the underground of France, the underground of Belgium, the underground of Germany with weapons, and then we will mass in Poland, and we will sweep across Europe, and we will retake Europe from Islam, because there will be no other way to do it.
Wow, that's a dark future, but I think you're right. I mean, Islam thinks long term, right? Those people think hundreds and hundreds of years in the future, so they're outbreeding Westerners. They're slowly infiltrating. They're slowly bringing in the Sharia law. I think UK's already got Sharia courts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So who's the next Charles Martel?
Good question. And I wonder who's going to talk as much about those two Swedish girls I just heard about as they talked about Khashoggi. I mean, this is a major problem in Europe. that the women cannot walk freely in the streets of their own towns, and it gets no press.
Right. Yeah, that's that cultural suicide of the West. I don't know why we're turning a blind eye to Islamic extreme. Not even Islamic extreme. It's just Islam in general. They abuse women. Walk behind me, put your hijab on, no driving, no voting, whatever. You're my wife. I'll beat you if I want. I'll have 2 wives if I want. That's Islam.
Well, Brexit is a reaction to this. You know, it really is to the immigration that the British have been seeing through the EU. Brexit is, I believe, more of a reaction to the immigration wave through the EU than anything else. Although that doesn't get played up as much, because nobody wants to look xenophobic.
Right.
But
because it's too politically incorrect.
Exactly.
The hell with political correctness, folks. Your culture, your lives are on the line here. Mm-hmm. You know, and this is what drives me crazy. The people, they love diversity so much. They love diversity. Do you know what happens if you allow Islam to expand? There won't be any diversity because you'll all be Islamists.
I don't know why anybody thinks diversity is so good. It's good to have another opinion, but you don't want 20 million different opinions. You want some kind of unity and assimilation. You know, it's this whole polyglot.
It's the melting pot. But you know what? A melting pot happens when you add cultures slowly, and you take
like
the best of the culture, and that part of the culture that's good melts in with everything else, and then like tacos. I love tacos. Tacos are huge in this country. Why? They've assimilated in. We have Latin Americans who brought good food. Man, there's nothing better than Mexican. If I had to pick one, I think I'm taking Mexican food. That's my favorite food, right? But you know, little things like just small sentences here or there, but there are things that come from each of these cultures that are good, and we assimilate them, and we love them.
And you get a chance to throw out what's bad. It's not all thrown in the mix all at once, like hey, everything's good, all's good. You know, no, it isn't.
Yeah, it's
no,
that
not
melting
at all.
pot.
Because where Islam goes, Sharia follows, and joy and liberty die.
Yeah. Well, take a look at the Middle East. Other than the ultimate super rich Arab states, the Middle East is a crap hole. It didn't used to be. Lebanon didn't used to be a crap hole. When there was a mix of Islam and Christianity and whatever else there, Lebanon was a great country.
Were driven out, yeah.
Egypt used to be a great place, right? I'm not going to Egypt. You can keep the pyramids. I'm not going there. You know, Algeria, Morocco used to be great places to visit. Not going there now.
Yeah, now people disappear in the mountains. Hikers get killed, beheaded, acid attacks all over the place.
There's some Nordic country. There's some Nordic country I read about that said they're putting all the Muslims on an island. It wasn't the Onion. I don't know. I didn't follow it too closely. That can't be right.
It's right. It's right. I heard it too. I mean, it's the ones they don't want, not all, the ones that they can't send back. So they're just going to stick them on this weird island.
Put them in an airplane and parachute them over Syria, man. Open airspace right now. Just tell the Russians, hey, we're dropping some paratroopers, but they're not paratroopers. They're just people we don't want. You know, shove them out the back of the plane, send them back home. I don't understand why you would keep those people. I really don't. Same with here. 60% of our population in jail is immigrants, illegal immigrants.
Yeah. Well,
I agree
that's
with
what we
that.
need to be talking about. Is
but you were
here.
talking about the jihad, the head covering, hijab, and they're having a national hijab day, and they don't understand that this hijab represents the suppression of women.
That's absolutely right.
Oh, but they're doing the fashion runway walk with the hijabs. You know, it's the Western version of the hijab. It'll be okay.
Yeah, all I can say to American women and Western European women, if you accept the hijab, you know what comes next? Domination. Mm-hmm. So much for your feminism, because you're going to be dominated by these men.
I wonder what a Islamic true believer would do to a transgender man wearing a hijab.
Well, you'd have to figure out that's what's under there first. So, you know, maybe there's a level of protection.
He'd separate the hijab from the rest of the body. I can assure you of that. That's what would happen.
But wait a minute. Let's go back to what Todd Wood was saying about Iran, though. There are moderate Muslims. Okay, they're not all out to kill us. Now, I've heard studies that say if they're a small percentage of the population, you're okay. But as soon as it gets over to the larger percentage, then they don't dare argue with the guy who's fomenting for Sharia. They just won't go against that. And there are small groups, they will. And they're so fine. You want to have some Muslims here? I know some fine Muslims, just fine. I don't know how they'd behave in another country, except they left there to come here, and they like the life they have here. So I don't think they'd be so receptive to having the